With the upcoming, highly anticipated release of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, which is looking like it very well may be the best Dragon Ball game ever, I've been feeling the urge to revisit some classic Dragon Ball titles, and today, we're going to be checking out Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2. Out of the entirety of the Budokai and Tenkaichi series, I feel Budokai 2 is probably the least talked about. But why is that? Was Budokai 2 a bad sequel, or is it just overshadowed by the later releases? Well, to answer that, let's hop in our time machine and travel back, way back, over 20 years ago to the year 2002 and the release of Budokai 1. I remember being absolutely blown away by the first entry in the series. At the time, I hadn't even seen all the show. I'd only had access to the bits and pieces I could catch on Toonami after school and occasionally on the weekends, but regardless, I was all in on Dragon Ball, gobbling up every bit of it that I could when possible. Which, it's sort of funny because for all the time I spent on Budokai 1, I never fully appreciated just how damn accurate its story mode was due to my lack of knowledge about the series at the time. During my playthrough for the making of this video, I was seriously impressed at how well it holds up. The cutscenes are fantastic and recreate some absolutely iconic moments from the anime, and even if you'd never seen the show, a run-through story mode would leave you with a pretty good understanding of what took place up through the Cell arc. It is a little disappointing that the Buu arc isn't covered, but hey, for what is covered, it's excellent. Seriously, this is one of the best story modes offered in any Dragon Ball game. Gameplay was actually surprisingly tight and much better than I expected going into it, even if it is technically the worst from a gameplay perspective of the three Budokai titles. Hopping through these menus and checking out the different game modes was super nostalgic thanks to the art and music, and I definitely dredged up some memories of refreshing Mr. Popo's shop for what seemed like an eternity.
Welcome, I'll sell you all kinds of capsules.
Looking for a capsule that I needed to buy.
Bye-bye.
The first Budokai is a title that I hold very dear to my heart, and when the second Budokai title released, I knew it was something that I absolutely needed. I mean, for God's sake, it had Vegito on the cover. That meant it was going to cover the Buu arc and have fusion. Things were different back then though. I couldn't just go out and buy a game whenever I wanted. I had to wait, and wait I did, but eventually I got my hands on it.
No more waiting!
I remember thinking just how cool it was that the front cover art was entirely holographic. It was absolutely gorgeous. I was beyond excited. This was going to be my dream game. But, as I soon found out, things weren't quite what I expected. Instead of a sort of updated and more complete take on the entire story of Dragon Ball Z, complete with a brand new cel-shaded graphical art style, Budokai 2 took an entirely different approach to its quote-unquote story mode. What we got was Dragon World. Now, I'd like to just start off by saying that in the long run, I actually quite enjoyed Dragon World. I felt it really did a great job of making the primary story mode more replayable, and it was certainly designed with that in mind. But that doesn't mean that as a kid, I wasn't a bit surprised by it. I don't think disappointed is the right word. It was just absolutely nothing like the story mode of Budokai 1. Instead, Dragon World turned the different arcs of Dragon Ball into a sort of board game, where the player controls Goku and one or more other allies, moving them across the map, one turn at a time towards your enemies and objectives. There were no cutscenes whatsoever, and the story just sort of loosely followed along with the events of the show, with some things being outright different, like Vegeta not being present when the Saiyans first arrive. He actually doesn't show up until our arrival on Namek. Or Frieza appearing on Earth, having come to search for the Dragon Balls before the Namek arc, or Babidi reviving and homogenizing, is that a word? Frieza and Cell during the Buu arc. Also, right from the get-go, you had access to Buu Saga characters like Adult Gohan to take with you through the mode, which kinda confused me as well. I can definitely see why some folks may prefer the more traditional, straightforward style of storytelling, even if we have heard it what seems like hundreds of times. But I think Dragon World is unique and sort of stands apart from the majority of the other Dragon Ball games out there, particularly with how characters and abilities are unlocked. Initially, things in the mode seem fairly simple. Accompanied by a slightly silly sound, you bounce your way across the board, pick up power-ups, face off against enemies, fight them again until their health bar is depleted, kill them, and unlock stuff. You really have the freedom to approach the different maps however you choose, but there are certain requirements for some unlocks that are sort of unique, and it's kinda cool because some of them are tied to the ways things unfolded in the events of the anime. For instance, on Namek, the game doesn't just give you the ability to go Super Saiyan with Goku. If you want to unlock it, you need to bring Krillin with you, and he needs to die. Poor Krillin. Also, on the same stage, if you want to unlock Frieza as a playable character, you need to beat him with Goku. I actually didn't do this on my first run, instead I beat him with Adult Gohan, but in turn I unlocked the Super Saiyan ability for him, which I wouldn't have otherwise unlocked. In the same way, if I'd instead beaten Frieza with Vegeta, I could have unlocked Super Saiyan for him as well. Want to unlock Android 18? Well, you need to take her down with Krillin then.
18! I love you! Would you be my girlfriend?
These are just a few examples, but the mode is filled with tons of unique ways to unlock characters and abilities, and ways that sometimes make you feel rewarded for having knowledge as a Dragon Ball fan of how events are supposed to play out. Progressing through Dragon World is, for the most part, a pretty fun experience. Things can get a little repetitive when fighting characters like the Cybermen or Cell Juniors multiple times, or if an enemy happens to land on one of the Dende spaces and they heal themselves repeatedly, which thankfully I didn't have happen in my runs, but it's overall a pretty fun, if a little quirky, experience. I mentioned earlier there aren't any cutscenes, and while that's true, there are narration sequences that happen when certain characters meet up, and they aren't just text, they're fully voice acted, which I thought was a really nice touch.
So you're Frieza, huh? You're a lot more puny than I thought.
I see, and you're a lot stronger than I thought.
Dragon Balls can also be collected while moving across the various stages. Finding them is pretty straightforward. You pick up the Dragon Radar with any of your characters, move to the spot indicated by the radar, and voila, you've got yourself a shiny new Dragon Ball. Collect all 7 by the end of the story, and you'll get to summon Shenron, which among other things is used to unlock Babidi's spaceship, a separate game mode that offers challenges like seeing how many endlessly respawning enemies you can take out before dying, or how many Ki Blasts you can reflect within a set time period. Before we move on to the next game mode, I'd like to just briefly touch on difficulty, and in particular, let's give a shout out to the final boss of the game, Kid Buu. Man, this guy. For the most part, the entirety of the story is fairly easy, with not many fights really offering a huge degree of challenge, but when you get to this little it's like the difficulty knob gets cranked from a 3 to a 10, I swear. He even taunts you, like he knows exactly what's going on. Okay, World Tournament. I swear, if Sparking Zero doesn't have a World Tournament mode, I'm gonna have an aneurysm. The World Tournament is absolutely iconic in the Budokai and Tenkaichi series, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that a lot of my best memories of the series come from playing this alongside friends, seeing how far we can get on higher difficulties, and even facing off against one another. While it looks like Sparking Zero won't have local multiplayer play via split screen, which makes Jarvo very sad, the potential that a multiplayer tournament mode has is huge. Queuing into a bracket that's full of real players and competing for the top spot would be absolutely amazing. Alright, let's talk gameplay, which is where this one really shines compared to its predecessor. The skill system, otherwise known as ESS, makes a return, allowing you to equip various skills and equipment to your character. So if there's a special attack you want to use on your favorite character, you have to unlock and equip it. The same is true for transformations, which are also treated as skills. Everything you equip takes up a certain amount of the limited number of slots you have access to. For instance, if you want to equip Goku with the Super Saiyan 3 transformation, it'll require all its prereqs. When all is said and done, you won't have much space left available to equip other skills or items, so choose wisely. In addition to just looking better overall with its new graphical style, everything in Budokai 2 just feels smoother while playing. Special moves like the Kamehameha no longer require a string of inputs to pull off, although of course, if you prefer, you can still combo into them as in the prior title. Certain attacks also gain the requirement to have additional inputs entered after you land them. Some aren't so bad, requiring you and your opponent to choose a button, and if your opponent guesses wrong, the attack lands. Other special moves though, they require you to rotate your analog sticks at insane speeds. Seriously, my Xbox One controller will never be the same after this video. The ultimates look damn good though, especially considering that this is a 20-plus-year-old game. And I couldn't make a video about this game and not talk about fusions, since they're arguably the most unique thing Budokai 2 offers. Fusions are accessible by equipping a skill to a compatible character. After the skill's equipped, you perform a combo string that initiates the fusion. If you're attempting a Metamoran fusion, you're required to input a series of commands in the correct order. If you're successful, the fusion will go off without a hitch, otherwise you'll get a failed fusion. Potara fusions work in a similar manner, except that instead of needing to input a string of button inputs, you do a single input and your opponent has the opportunity to intercept the Potara if they guess correctly, fizzling out the attempt. Vegito and Gotenks are of course the most powerful fusions in the game, even being featured in Dragon World, and Budokai can be unlocked as well. The awesome thing about Budokai 2 though is that it features what-if fusions and absorptions. Yep, that's right. We get to see what would happen if Yamcha and Tien fused, or Goku and Hercule fused, which the results are pretty terrifying for the latter, I'll say. The same goes for Super Buu. We get to see what would happen if he'd absorbed Vegeta, Frieza, or others. The what-ifs are an absolute treat for Dragon Ball fans, and something we don't really see in titles after Budokai 2. Oh, and the one other thing I'd like to mention is the intro video that plays when you start the game. While it's true that the rest of the game doesn't have any cutscenes, it's sort of made up for by this. The intro is super clean and gets you absolutely hyped to play some Dragon Ball. It honestly may be the best intro of the Budokai and Tenkaichi series. Overall, for me, Budokai 2 is a great game. When you consider the fact that it came out just 1 year after the release of Budokai 1, it's kind of amazing how much improvement we saw. Personally though, if I'm going back to play one of these goated PS2 titles, I don't find myself reaching for it often, but instead opt for Budokai 3, Tenkaichi 2, or Tenkaichi 3. But what do you think? Do you think Budokai 2 is a good game, despite being somewhat overshadowed by its successors? Do you ever find yourself returning to it over the likes of the other offerings? Let me know down below. This is Jarbo Gaming. We'll see you on the next one.